Hello, everyone, and Madayaw! It's me, author Maita. How are you guys today? This is chapter 9, and I hope you enjoy it. So by this time, if you've been catching up with my chapters, Rose broke it up with Elle. Yeah, it was about time anyway. I was really trying to figure out when they would break up. Originally, before I wrote this chapter, I was already in the next chapter. They didn't break up until like the ending, but now I've decided, nope, they're gonna break out now because she's not that kind of girl who plays around with two guys. It's either Elle or Gus. Now, goodbye, Elle. Does Gus like her? She's gonna try to have to find out for herself, because, yeah. Anyways, Rose's personality is like that. She's actually very kind-hearted. She's just caught up in things and insecurities and stuff, and So, I do try to put some of my own feelings here in this stories, because it has to have some semblance of realness, and there are some things that you deal with as a big girl. And these are one of them. These are actually quite common when you are a little big. I've never reached her size, but I can surmise, and I've had friends who do feel this way. They have to really embrace themselves before they really find their identity. So I hope you guys enjoy this, because I did enjoy writing it. And this book, although I've already written the book, it's 55,000 words. I want to expand it, and it's the reason why I read it. So it's different when you just read it, and it's different when you listen to it. So I'm hoping you guys enjoy it, because I want to take you guys into my writing journey. It's not just listening to it for me. It's really, I posted it for also your enjoyment. If you liked something, you didn't like something, I'd really appreciate it if you can comment, so I can either change some things, modify some things, or just know where I stand in all this, because your opinions matter. I want this book published by a big publisher. If not, I will be posting it on Amazon very soon. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks, guys, and here it is, chapter 9. Chapter 9, Shadow Wars. Elzo wants her back, but also wants her to pay for what she did. He couldn't go near the places Rose was. She roamed Rose often, and he was confined to the men's room in the casino. But she didn't know there was still a way for him to come closer without her seeing him. She'd soon realize her mistake. She'd be begging to come back, and he'd beat her up as punishment. He watched the plaza, trying to see who'd turn her against him. Was she in costume just outside? She was in costume just... She was in her costume just outside her tent. People milled about, asking her questions. Some went in for a reading. Later, foreigners came and went. There were a lot of them. Werewolves, she said, but there was a vampire too, and some shifters. Even the local staff were nice to her. He hated that she was enjoying her life, forgetting about him. She wouldn't answer his calls or messages. He even bought a new SIM card to message her, but she ignored it. She must have cast another spell so he couldn't contact her. But Elzo didn't want to go back home. Manila was a nice playground. It resonated with so much energy. Why couldn't Rosie stick with the program? She'd just have to work a few more months before they could get a small apartment. He'd prefer one with 2 rooms. He didn't like Rose's perfume. She was so paranoid of smelling like a pig that she drowns in perfume instead. That fat pig used to be so gullible. These foreigners turned her against him. It was payback time. She left to have a midnight break and was in the employees' cafeteria when some of the janitorial staff called her. Her tent was blaring loudly. It was the anti-theft sensor she put. Rose ran to her tent and saw the tent flap, and her tent was open, and some of the console cabinets were forced open. Nothing was taken, but only because the staff was alerted by the blaring noise. Marcus came down and said her console cabinet would be fixed for her. The next night, there was a tarantula in her tent. She took the poor tarantula and released it in the gardens behind the shops. Later, someone slipped a snake in her tent. Poor creature. It curled inside one of her fluffy pillows because of the cold temperature. The plaza was inside a dome, and it had 24 hours air conditioning. The low temperatures forced the poor snakes to sleep. Rose had asked one of the janitors to take the snake to the animal shelter. She had to give up one of her pillows. She didn't want to jostle the snake around. Of course, it didn't stop there. Someone tried to burn her tent, but her flame retardant prevented them from burning. The wolves blamed it on vandals. Marcus posted more security around the plaza. There were many theories floating around the resort, from a rival fortune teller to a drunken vandal who had a tent fetish. Rose kept silent, but she was vigilant. The preparation she made had warned her in advance. She would be vigilant. Let me take this out. This is redundant. The preparation she made would warn her in advance. El was raging when he spotted Rose with a young man. No, he wasn't a man. From the looks of it, that foreigner was one of the werewolves. He gave Rosie what smelled like flavored fries. She laughed and gave him a kiss on the cheek. That hussy, he thought. Was this all she did for the resort? Flirt her way to money and gifts? Not an hour later, somebody else dropped by, a girl. This girl, too, brought Rose some food. They walked around the plaza talking about girly things. Rose drew a card and told her something. The girl looked happy about the reading and left. Rose, she returned to her little tent in the plaza. Her clients came and went. He thought those stupid idiots didn't care about their money. Rose fooled them. She was supposed to earn enough to support them. Now, even if she got her own boarding space, he couldn't go to it. She made sure of that. Her threats were never real. She always came back. She spotted another foreigner enter her tent. This man was big. Was this the famous Marcus Simeon, or one of his many werewolves? His reading took a little longer. An electronic beep heralded a transaction pushing through. The man thanked her and left. Another big foreigner entered the tent. He sat and talked to Rose and was quite familiar with her. El could hear Rose laugh at the man's joke. He promised to bring her to some new exhibit in the garden tomorrow. She used to laugh at every joke he told her. They'd have milk tea and fishball by the bay back home. Life was simpler, and she was content being simple. Yeah, scraping by wasn't the best, but Rosie always made the best of it. That charlatan offered her a job here, and she went and jumped at a chance. She told him goodbye and left. She'd left him for this? Now it was final? She cast a spell that he couldn't enter her line of sight. Here he was, hiding in the shadows. There she was, eating buffet and flirting with foreigners. Was she too good for him? They were just outside the tent now. Rosie was saying goodbye. The werewolf turned around and kissed her full in the mouth. Rosie kissed him back. How disgusting, he thought. He was devouring her. She was acting like a slut lately, kissing and hugging. El made it clear to her that there would be no touching or anything like that. He thought Rose would grow out of it. Now she was acting like such a dog in heat. Is that what these wolves wanted? She giggled and said something to him. He growled in approval. I'll take you shopping tomorrow, he said. The next day didn't come soon enough. El had to find a quiet corner to sleep in, which was a feat at Wolves. Most places were hardly dark, and there were cameras everywhere. He had to sleep in the Bay Area like some common homeless man. He couldn't even sneak into Rose's van anymore.
since she put wards specifically to ward him off. Rose was with the clown of a wolf early at 10 in the morning. She was on his arm like a barnacle. He hated that wolf. He hated all wolves. They took his Rosie from him. They went shop after shop. He bought her useless fripperies. By lunch, they went to a cafe near the garden. By then, he was so angry already. He hated relationships. Rose was conveniently there. Now she wasn't. She was with those werewolves. Angry, he took a rock and hurled it at the werewolf. Unfortunately, a passing waiter came carrying a tray of drinks, came into the line of view. The rock hit the tray, spilling glass and drinks everywhere. The wolf caught the waiter and helped him up, but Rosie's cheek had a streak of red. A piece of glass flew dangerously close to her eye, but scraped her cheek instead. Panicked, the werewolf went crazy. He scooped Rose up and ran. The waiter kept apologizing profusely, not knowing what had taken place. Elle ran to follow Rose and the wolf. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the clinic. It was bright. He couldn't cross the threshold to find another shadow to hide in. Then he felt wards around the place. It also had a strong antiseptic smell which hurt his nose. He had to wait until Rose goes out. Angry, he went to the casino to distract himself. Maybe he could have some fun instead. Rose stretched her legs in the plaza. Gus had been so attentive yesterday. A little cut on her cheek sent him reeling. She had to calm him down in the clinic. He wanted to get an MRI and an X-ray for a cut on her cheek. He'd been so over the top. Today he sent her milk tea and a specially made gold tumbler monogrammed with her initials. He was sweet. Gus asked Rose to meet him at the top of the water park after work. Her last client ended at 2 in the morning. So she sent Gus a message. He had finished up in the dungeon, so he's eager to meet her. He waited for her until she closed up her tent. The water park at Wolves had an 8-story hotel with many of its own amenities in the building and at poolside. Most of the amenities here were family friendly. Gus took Rose to the rooftop. Rose gasped. The rooftop was a tropical oasis. There were so many lush plants that it seemed to cover the roof. Caleb owns this restaurant. You can tell with the number of plants the vamp's been planting. Restaurant? Rose was confused. When they rounded the bend of Palmeiras, Rose's eyes went wide. There was a narrow marbled hall with gilded chairs and glass tables. On one side were perennials of different kind. The other side was a floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking the bay. This is amazing! It was surreal. As Rose went closer to the glass wall, she saw a deck with a pool that faced the bay with glass walls. There were more plants outside. I've requested a poolside table. Gus led her to a glass door that led outside to the poolside. There was a table beside an alcove of plants. It would give them privacy to talk away from prying eyes. The moment they sat down, a waiter appeared and served them a large platter of different appetizers. I've ordered the tiny surf and turf, clam chowder, and garlic barbecue pork slab. For dessert, tiramisu and salted caramel chocolate ice cream. These are their best sellers. She would be full with only the appetizers, but Gus ate a lot. She tried to sample only a little of everything. The clam chowder was so creamy. Rose knew she would never taste clam chowder the same way again. This was so good. When the pork slab came out, it was 2 pounds of pork belly served on top of a butcher's block. You can order the same garlic barbecue pork slab in the cavern and at needlepoint. At the needlepoint. At the needlepoint. Rick was the one who made the recipe, Gus said. It was a buffet on its own. This pork slab could feed a family for a whole day. Rose bit the sliced portion Gus put on her plate. She closed her eyes. The pork was so soft and every bite was packed with flavors. Did you know all our meats are organic? Nina actually arranged it. I could tell the difference, Rose nodded. She could. The meat was fresh with no stale smell. Rick wanted to kiss her. She opted to support a small farm that can really commit to us and commit to our ethos of good quality products. The tiramisu and ice cream came out. Apparently, these were also made in-house. In basement 3, between shops in the water park, was a giant underground bakery. The bakery was always something Marcus wanted. The bakery was always something Marcus wanted to control the quality. Since the pandemic, it's in full swing. Did you know most of the resorts and restaurants in the area started to order from us? We have an ISO and SISO accreditation, which is a feat to acquire these days. Gus told her about the wonders Marcus was making, what he was to build, and what the other wolves were up to. Rose felt like she belonged. She did make it a point to make sure she was friendly to all of the pack members. After they consumed the dessert, Gus looked at the pool. Care for a swim? I didn't bring my swimsuit. So? Nobody's here. And they're closing at 5. Gus took out his tie, his shirt, and his pants. He jumped down into the water and emerged looking edible. Rose blushed. Gus was only in his underwear. Come on. Rose shook her head. She was too shy to strip in public. Even if there was nobody around, Gus' hand extended in an invitation. Wearing your lace under there? She blushed because she was. In fact, she bought another pair. She wanted to feel confident. These lace pair made her feel that way. Gus made her feel that way. Emboldened, she pulled her shirt to show him. She pulled off her shirt to show him. Oh, starshine, Gus moaned. He was beginning to regret this decision. If she got in the water, he knew he couldn't help but touch her. Rose pushed down her voluminous skirt. She slowly approached the side of the pool. The pool was only waist deep. It wasn't meant to swim in, just dip in. Gus put his hands on her hips and lifted her. She marveled at his strength. He tucked her in his larger body. Gus, is this real? He nodded, unable to find the words. His lips descended on hers. Rose tasted caramel and tiramisu on his lips. She gave up to the senses. His hands were everywhere, pulling her close. Was this real, or just a passing thing? She didn't know, but for now she wanted it to be real. Nobody had ever made her feel this way, like she mattered, like she was beautiful. Elle certainly never did. Gus' lips left her but was trailing down her neck and her chest. Finally they nestled on her breast. She moaned. He moaned. Something poked her on her thighs. She had an idea what it was, but afraid to look down. Besides, Gus's kisses were distracting. She gave up to the sensation. This was how she wanted to be treated, with love and affection. This was something Elle couldn't give her. A splash or two alerted Gus to something not quite right. He looked up to see several pots falling into the pool. Then the table where they ate fell on them, sending Rose underwater when the glass fell on her. When the glass table top fell on her. He pulled the glass off her and pulled her to her feet. The glass tabletops were no joke. They were tempered and thick. What in the world? The pool was a mess. What had just happened? Let's get out of here, Rose said. Did you feel an earthquake or something? He certainly didn't, but then Gus was so distracted, he hardly felt anything but Rose. He jumped out of the pool, taking Rose with him. The waiters came out to see the commotion. They too were baffled, but they reported no earthquake. It must be strong winds. Gus took Rose to the shower room, but by then she wasn't in the mood to fool around with Gus. Gus didn't push anything. He gave her a good night kiss and left her in the plaza. Lizzie sent her a message asking for a reading and consultation. Rose agreed and blocked off a couple hours for Lizzie. Usually a reading took 5 to 15 minutes, but Lizzie was special. Although Marcus told her to charge a reading or two to his account, she couldn't. Working with Lizzie was something she really wanted. She sent Lizzie a message and told her he could have a private meeting in her room if they could have a private meeting in her room instead of the tent. Lizzie agreed. Rose went up to Lizzie's room at the Simeon. Lizzie answered the first knock. She practically pulled Rose through the door. There was a buffet in front of them. Marcus sent me anything I wanted, so I had some ingredients ordered, and I've been experimenting the whole morning. The room was similar in theme to the room she woke up in the day her first date. This one, though, was like an apartment. It had a large lounge area, a formal dining area. The room was... This one, though, was like an apartment. It had a lounge area, a formal dining area where the food was spread, a kitchen, a living room, and 2 bedrooms. The living room was where they filmed most of Lizzie's episode. Marcus had a kitchen built with the floor-to-ceiling glass beyond as a backdrop. It overlooked Wolves and the Bay Area. Marcus said, "I can definitely start another cooking show. I told him about your ideas on cleansing cheesecakes. He loves it. We can rope in Stella for herbs. I've got some ideas. Great, I can cook while we brainstorm." Rose looked at the full dining spread. "What more do you want to cook?" Lizzie assessed the spread she had baked. "The pack's coming over for dinner. This ain't enough to feed those animals." Rose looked at the food. "This would be good for 1 wolf, not 20. "Yeah, let's start. Don't worry, I only volunteered dessert. Marcus is having burgers and pizza sent at 6. Can you stay?" "I can stay until 7. "Great, let's start with what spells and herbs to put in a cake. Ryan's cute, don't you think?" The question caught her off guard. "Huh?" Oh yeah, Marcus' nephew." Lizzie smiled then frowned. "Wishful thinking, but I can't mate a werewolf." "You can, though." "Why do you say that?" "Humans can mate with shifters and even vampires, but werewolves? You need to have Mythican blood, even a drop." She looked at Rose. "You can mate with werewolves?" Lizzie was easily excitable, but she was a teenager. "You're dating Gus, aren't you?" Rose blushed. "We kissed, but he hasn't formally asked me." She wasn't expecting a commitment. Given Gus's track record, he'd leave her heart along with his footsteps. "What? That Rose should hurry. You're quite a catch." "I am not." "Yes, you are. You're independent, good at what you do, and you're super cool." "Thanks, Lizzie. Only you'd say that. You're pretty cool too. You have a show and possibly a second one. You have millions in followers, and no doubt you'll go far." "Like a werewolf, I had to fight for it. Nobody knows how it feels to have your own money. Earning your own income gives you the freedom to do anything you want." It was true. People will judge her for having the same sentiments, but it wasn't about the money. It was the freedom to have the options that opened because she had the resources. "Does Rafe make you feel trapped?" She nodded. "He's nice, he and Daria, but I've lived my life with nothing. I don't even have parents. Daria's grandparents took me in from the street. I was living in a garbage can for the first 6 years of my life." "I can relate. My parents abandoned me. I'm grateful my aunt and grandmother took me in. But they weren't exactly warm people," she said. "And you became something super cool. You have a tent in the middle of the plaza at Wolves. It's super cool." "But you're making something out of yourself too." Rose pointed out that Lizzie was young, and because of Rafe, she was visible on social media. "I have to. I want to show everyone I'm not some poor girl to be pitied. I'm as strong as any other wolf." Rose smiled. "I'd let you pick a card, but something tells me you already know your destiny." "What?" "You'll break free. It's not in your cards. It's in your aura." "Really?" "Really." "Great! Now let's bake." They spent the afternoon talking about herbs that countered spells. Not everything could be a cheesecake. There should be more varieties. Lizzie made a batch of brownies that counteracted malicious love spell. They made a dozen gingerbread cookies that countered manipulation and kulam or malicious spells. They made 24 muffins that countered bad luck. For the fifth pastry, rosemary lime and kefir butter cake. Our final pastry should be special. I'll make the cleansing cheesecake, but maybe tweak it a bit more. I don't think I have any more space for the burgers and pizza. Rose's girdle panties were protesting. They ate as Lizzie baked, so by the time they finished, they were already full. The place smelled heavenly. It smelled of fresh baked goods and delectable flour and a delectable flower called Rose. A little before 6, members of the Urbane pack dropped one by one. Gus was delighted to see Rose at Lizzie's suite. They've been baking the whole afternoon. He sampled the fruits of their labor. Gus knew Rose had a hand in these. He could practically smell her hams. It tasted good. If only he can eat her instead. Slow down, Gus. A lot of us want to have a taste too, Rick complained. He took a muffin. Lizzie and Rose said this will counteract bad luck or those wishing you bad luck. I can't wait to see if it works. Those asshole bloggers always giving me 3 stars because I don't allow them to eat free. Can stay away. My ribs are 10 stars. Nina and the kids came. She was showing off her 1-year-old Marcus Jr. The pack took turns carrying the little boy. He was calm because he knew he was surrounded by family. Pack members went to chat with Rose. They treated her as they treated everyone else. She was happy that they accepted her readily. She felt she really belonged. Gus was refilling her plate when she finished it. She was getting full. He was very attentive, fetching her drinks or just staying beside her. Stella and Caleb arrived. Stella agreed to provide most of the herbs at Wolves. They could shoot some scenes in the rooftop garden. She was happy to show them what she and Caleb have done so far. I want all 3 of you to guest in my show. I'm nobody special, Stella said. I'm too shy. You 3 are my fairy godmothers. Hey, I foot the bill, Marcus said. Fairy godmother? Does that make Rafe the evil stepfather? They all laughed. Everyone was having such a nice time. 10 minutes to 7, she bade them all goodbye as she had a client coming to the tent. Things went missing in the casino, and Marcus didn't like that. Nobody liked it one bit. Caleb, who was part owner, was angry. Force, their head of security, was angry. Gus suspected something. Too many incidents plagued the plaza lately. Scrap that. Too many incidents plagued Rose's tent in the past few weeks. This was no laughing issue anymore. He was in Marcus's office discussing the opening of the dungeon. Between discussing the opening night and Lizzie's meet and greet, they were talking about the troubles in the plaza. So he's stalking the plaza? No, Marcus might lead a business pack, but he didn't like encroachment in his properties. Not the plaza. He's stalking Rose, Gus said. You sure? I felt a malevolent presence hovering near her. Felt like it had bad intent. Then these things happen to her tent. They're vandals, and these aren't coincidence. I don't like it. Werewolves can sense magic, or dark magic. We should ask Caleb to take a whiff. Vampires could also detect malevolent magic being used. Marcus nodded. Because vampires were forbidden to use dark magic, they knew its acrid smell very well. The alpha wolf texted on his phone to explain to Caleb. He says he'll be right down in the plaza. Wait, I don't want Rose to be afraid. She's pretending this isn't happening, but I'm sure she knows, Gus informed him. How do you know? When the maintenance crew replaced her slashed tent curtains, I smelled flame retardants. There were also a couple of burn marks. I never put flame retardants on those curtains. She knows the stalker and his tactic, Gus said. You sure she didn't see the future? All her precautions are working against the stalker. She might have seen her cards. She could, but I can't shake the feeling the stalker is targeting her in particular. Well, I won't stand for it if that's the case. I like Rose. She's good for the pack's morale. She's also good for business. I'll alert Force to put extra guards around the plaza. Force William Urbane was their head of security. Marcus was going to talk to him and see how the stalker was able to enter. Force would spot anything out of the ordinary in the security camera. He sent the wolf a message. Force was an old wolf, older than Marcus, but he joined the Urbane pack because he was raising a family. Loners with family didn't do well outside pack protection. Force integrated well for a loner. He kept himself in the security booth, but trains new recruits to his security force personally. Force texted that he reviewed every camera around the plaza within the last 3 weeks, especially those during the incidents Gus mentioned. He'd briefed some of the pack on what to look out for tonight. Caleb said he'd go down to the plaza and pretend to get a reading from Rose, but will look around the perimeter and try to sense any magic being used. If anyone could sense magic, it would be a vampire or a fellow witch. The next day, the vampire had an answer. Caleb texted Marcus and told him to bring Gus and Force in his office. They weren't going to like what he sensed. Gus was there the whole time since he and Marcus were still discussing the opening of the dungeon. Well, Gus demanded when Caleb and Force came in. You're not gonna like this, Caleb began. This is so rare. I didn't know what I was smelling at first, but I called up my contacts in Legenda, and just to be sure. Legenda was the underground city in Hungary where King David, the king of the vampires, resided. Since coming out of hiding, they decided to set up a government to protect the rights of those who weren't quite human. Spit it out, man, Gus wanted to know. Caleb's expression was grim. Was it so bad? Gus's gut was churning. He really liked Rose. If something bad stalked her, he was going down there and charge it head on. Force positioned himself near the door and leaned on the wall. Caleb pulled a seat and sat in front of Marcus. Marcus poured him coffee. It's an umbrakin. Force's expression darkened. So did Marcus. Gus was confused. What's an umbrakin? A legend. An umbrakin are beings, a tier, same as vampires and elves, long thought to be wiped out. I heard whispers that they survived here in the Philippines, long after the Spanish Revolution. Marcus poured brandy in his coffee. Some say they had a hand in the Spanish Revolution. Umbrakins are supposed to be 100% humans, but they have gifts. Gifts too dangerous for humans, Force said. What's so special about them? Gus was totally confused. If this Umbrakin was human, how could he be at the topmost tier as vampires? Creatures of legends or mythicans had classifications. Vampires, dragons, elves, and other beings were at the topmost tiers. Werewolves and shifters fell on the middle tiers, while witches and other magic users fell to the third tier. Umbrakins have many magical talents, including umbrakinesis. It's a power that means they can manipulate shadows. Some can even teleport using shadows. Gus frowned. Caleb's expression of their powers wasn't all that bad. Werewolves and shifters had claws. Shadow manipulation would be a huge advantage, but they still had other senses to combat this. Even he could smell this umbrakin, so he could track it and slash it. Caleb continued. What's dangerous about umbrakins are that they can summon demons and even ask for powers from them. In exchange, they don't have to give up their souls, but another's, Caleb explained. Oops. This is redundant. Wait. What do you mean by another's soul? As far as Gus knew, no demon can devour a soul that isn't given in exchange. If an umbrakin summons a demon, they can exchange your soul instead of their own. But demons can't devour souls of the innocent. That was one of the protection they had against these creatures. Caleb took a sip of his coffee. All humans have original sin. Oh my Rose! How are we going to stop this Umbrakin? And what does it want with Rose? Gus wanted to charge down the plaza and bubble wrap Rose or take her away or something. He just wanted to protect her. Based on what my contact said, Umbrakins often get obsessive. A lot of them become serial killers and stalkers. They tend to latch on something and someone. Then that's it. They can't seem to let go. Perhaps he saw Rose and decided to latch on to her. Lucky for us, this Umbrakin seems to have mixed blood. Caleb took another sip of his coffee. It means his powers have limits. Still, he could slip in and out of wolves undetected, Force said. He hated security breach, especially those he couldn't counteract. There's that. I heard about that kind of skill. Umbrakins can hide in the shadows, be undetectable, and stay in that pocket dimension. The vampire sipped his coffee. Clearly he didn't like this Umbrakin situation any more than they did. Can we block him with magic? Caleb shook his head. Where there are shadows, he could enter. That's umbraportation. So what do we do? Gus didn't want anything to happen in wolves. He took pride in all the work the pack has done. As Force said, Umbrakins are still 100% human. Claws and fangs aren't a match for him. Salt is also a major deterrent. He can't cross, especially when he takes to the shadow. Marcus smiled. The fountain near the plaza uses pumped salt water from the bay. We could use salt water to wash the plaza. If anyone asks, it's our newest eco-trend. Salt water dries, then it's useless. The salt has to be there and has to stay. Any break in the lines means our Umbrakin can jump from one salt-free area to another, Caleb pointed out. Force grunted. That's a problem. How do we sprinkle so much salt in the plaza with our Umbrakin none the wiser? Gus wanted to growl. He's trying to take his Rose. His wolf didn't like that. We'll have to catch him. This Umbrakin can't be allowed to wander in our territory. He was about to rush off to the plaza and find the Shadow Man. Slow down, Gus. We need a plan, Marcus said. Gus sat back down, but he was still edgy. Caleb, are all Umbrakins bad? Caleb frowned. Not necessarily, because they're still humans, but their connection to the shadows and the dimension of demons keep the doors open. The whispers, they said, is too tempting not to be heard. They either give in or it drives them mad. Also, that kind of power is addicting. We'll assume he's up to no good. Force always assumes suspicious behaviors means up to no good. I don't like this. I'll be down in the plaza later to get a feel of the situation. Rose seemed prepared for the shadow. Marcus, as Alpha, had to defend his territory. Gus wanted to tear into the shadow. Nobody was going to take Rose from him. Force, tell the pack to be on alert. Everyone has to be extra vigilant. This shadow cannot be underestimated, Marcus said. Gus and Force nodded. Marcus stepped in her tent. There was no client, so he went right in. Knock, knock. Can I get a reading? Hi, Marcus. Sure. She brought out 2 decks. What will your question be? There's trouble plaguing the plaza and the casino. I need to know what it is, he stated. Rose fidgeted. Yeah, let me use my oracle cards. She shuffled the deck and drew 3 cards. Marcus turned one over. The shadow card. Whose shadow is this? A nuisance. Probably a disgruntled man? Perhaps he didn't win enough times in the casino. Maybe. Marcus turned the second card without reading for Rose. The fog. What's being hidden? His intent. The man might be suffering. The man might be after something, or he doesn't know what he wants. A he. feels like a he. What would this mean for us? He flipped the last card, which would tell the immediate future, the devil card. Rose gasped. Should I be worried? Not particular, but this means he's up to no good. Do you know this shadow? She shook her head. Answer me honestly. Marcus, I don't know about this shadow, she lied. The alpha wolf nodded and left. End of chapter 9.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed writing it. And I hope you join me for tomorrow as I read another chapter of Big Bad Wolf meets Big Beautiful Maid. So, bye for now. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. And please comment down below what you like, what didn't you like, any suggestions. This book is not yet finished. Thanks, everyone.